3000.
What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by a tattooist, a tattooist, a podcaster, and an artist, MJ Forrest. MJ, thanks for coming, man.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so I'm stoked to be here.
Thanks, man. No, I'm a fan of yours as well, and there's not too many podcasts that I see from Melbourne. Maybe I'm just not watching the right ones that have a really high production quality, and yours, like, man, it's right up there, and it's very impressive. And I was like,
Thank you.
this is done fucking well.
Thanks. I full credit to Stupid Old Studios in Brunswick. That's
their name.
That's all that. Yeah, it's literally called Stupid Old Studios. I was watching. There's a comedian I like, Andrew Santino, and when he was in Australia filming a movie, he recorded some episodes of his podcast there with John Cena and Jimmy Carr and stuff.
Really?
And then I found out it was in Brunswick. I was like, oh, cool. I'm looking to do another season. I'll hit them up. And then I did know it was. I went in and met them, and I was like, yeah, this is the place. It looks so cool. So yeah, if anyone's gonna start a podcast, I'd hit them up. Stupid Old Studios for sure.
Yeah, man. Like, I just looked at the production quality and everything, and I'm like, that looks really professional, and made me a little bit jealous.
Well, it's only because season 1 of the podcast looked so fucking awful, man, that I was like, I need to do something about that.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know if it looked awful, but I think it's, when you compare it to season 2, there's obviously no comparison.
I overcorrected. Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning where we normally do. I know you didn't grow up in Melbourne, but you'd call yourself a Melburnian now, I'm guessing. But
Yeah, I'll take it.
but you grew up in the country, in regional area in New South Wales, I believe. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, man. I grew up in a tiny country town called Leeton. I don't know what the population is, but it's pretty small.
Yeah.
And I grew up there, and then I moved to Wagga Wagga in New South Wales for university in 2011, I think. And then I was there for about 7 years before finally moving to Melbourne. So, I apprenticed in Wagga, went to uni, studied photography and graphic design, and it was good. Like, the plan was to always move to Melbourne. Like, I think I came to Melbourne when I was 14 with my family on a holiday and instantly fell in love. Like, we went to Hosier Lane and, like all those graffiti laneways. I was like, oh man, this is so sick.
Yeah.
This is so cool. So it was always the game plan. I'm like, I'm going to go to uni. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to move to Melbourne and be a photographer. And then I started apprenticing while I was at uni. I was like, all right, I'll do the apprenticeship. I'll stick around for a couple of years, pay my dues, and then I'll move to Melbourne. So eventually it got to the point where I felt, all right, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, right. So even though you're in New South Wales, Sydney was never ever on the radar.
No, look, I had an uncle in Sydney and we'd visit him occasionally. And I liked it, but there was just something about Melbourne, like straight away. It was like, because I'd been to Sydney a bunch at that point, and then coming to Melbourne, it just felt so different. Mm-hmm. And I was, we went to Movida, which is in Hosier Lane as well, like this Spanish restaurant. Went there with my family, had the most mind-blowing meal of my 14-year-old life, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And it's like still my favorite restaurant. I don't know whether it's like the nostalgia attached to it or whatever, but I love it so fucking much. So it was just like things like that. And, it's a city that's built on art and culture and music and all those things. So
All that good stuff.
yeah, dude. So I was like, nah, this is where I want to be. And it was always the plan. And then I've like, anytime I go traveling or go overseas or whatever, I'm always comparing it to Melbourne. And every time I'm like, Melbourne's better.
Yeah, I do that too. Even when I go to other cities within Australia, I'll be like, and this is kind of like the Brunswick of here, or this is the Richmond. I'm always trying to compare it to Melbourne in some way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's you're always going to compare it. And I think the thing about Melbourne is it has all those elements that you love about the other cities, but it has all of them combined. It's sort of that melting pot of all those little elements from European cities or American cities or whatever, other Australian cities. Melbourne's got it all.
It's got it all. So let's talk about when you went from wanting to do photography to then the tattoo apprenticeship thing. Like in Wagga Wagga, was there many people with tattoos? Was there many studios? Like, were you influenced with stuff you saw on the internet? Like, where did that sort of come from?
When I first started getting tattoos, I was getting what you'd probably call little white girl tattoos. I was getting the Roman numerals, the song lyrics, all that sort of stuff. And I hadn't really been exposed to like American traditional tattooing, which is what I do now, and it's what I love the most. But I was just getting like little ones here and there, and I didn't think I was going to be covered. I just sort of wanted like little bits and pieces. And I was getting tattooed at a shop called Conspiracy Tattoo by Dan Pollock, who went on to mentor me. And at the time, there was 2 other tattoo shops in town. And I felt like Conspiracy at that time had the best reputation as well. And yeah, so I was just going in there periodically, spending, grocery money on tattoos, and then not eating throughout the week and shit like that. And yeah, I was in there, I was getting a tattoo, and I just needed a job. I was 19, and I was in my second year of uni, and I said, hey, do you know anywhere hiring? Thinking like bars, cafes, stuff like that. And he's like, oh, well, you want to come in on Saturdays and scrub tubes and serve customers and mop the floor, and I'll give you $100. Yeah. I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. I get to hang out in the tattoo shop, $100. It was like $12 an hour, but I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, $100. And I also got free tattoos as well. So I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And I had no ambition of apprenticing. At this point, I'm like, I'm still going to be a photographer. Right. This is just pocket money, Yeah. And I was really enjoying it. And like, I'd ask a lot of questions just because I'm curious about stuff. I'll be like, what's the Vaseline for? Like, why do you do that? Yeah. And he'd answer. And then the shop was just getting busier and busier and busier. And it was getting to the point where he needed another tattooer. There was another guy that would come periodically. He lived in Thailand, would come periodically. But he needed like a full-time tattooer. And convincing an established tattooer to move to Wagga just wasn't going to happen. So he's like, fuck, I've got this kid here, like, do you want to apprentice? And I was like, yeah, fuck it, why not? Right place, right time.
Were you drawing at this time?
Yeah, I'd always drawn and painted, but it was more so like I loved cartoons and illustrations, so like political cartoons in newspapers, like caricatures, all that sort of stuff. I loved that. So I'd always done that sort of stuff. But in terms of like tattoo-related drawing and painting, none. Like none at all. So, I see all these people going for apprenticeships now, and they have portfolios with like sheets of flash that's amazing. And it's like, dude, my stuff was garbage,
But you were right place, right time.
Right place, right time. We had a really good relationship. He trusted me. All those sort of like qualities that I feel like you can't teach someone. You can teach someone to draw. You can teach someone to tattoo, but it's like all that other stuff that you can't teach them, which is super important. I was just lucky to be in that sort of situation. So I said yes. And then I started my apprenticeship while I was still studying full-time at uni. I failed a couple of subjects, so I think
Studying photography?
Yeah, it was a double degree. So I was simultaneously studying a Bachelor of Graphic Design as well as a Bachelor of Photography. And so I was still doing that, and I had 2 bar jobs. So I don't know how I had any time for anything, but made it work. And and then by the time I graduated uni, I just started tattooing full time. I was at that point in my apprenticeship where it's like, cool, start getting customers in. So just straight into it, and haven't really used my degrees at all, ever.
But when you say you haven't used your degrees, I'm sure you've used stuff that you've learnt there and all that sort of, like graphic design goes a long way in any business, even if you've just got like a strong backing from that. Yeah,
for sure. Like marketing myself and stuff like that. I've done like branding and branding identity for mates' businesses and things like that. And I've made branding guides for other tattooers it's like a PDF they can buy. And it's like, learn how to brand yourself. You're a business. Treat it like a business, so...
That is something that I think happens a lot with tattooers now because it's a very competitive market. You have to brand yourself. You've got to be very strong on your social media, and you've got to have that really cool business card or that really cool Instagram profile to set yourself aside from everyone else.
Dude, absolutely. It's like every other business, you think of a sports brand, Nike's the first one that comes to mind. You think of fast food, McDonald's is the first one that comes to mind. You need a new phone, Apple is the first thing that comes to mind. So it's like, why would you not want to be the first tattooer to come to mind when someone's in the market for a tattoo?
Yep.
How do you do that? You have to brand yourself. You need branding identity. How do you put stuff online that's on brand if you don't know what your brand is? So all that sort of stuff I think is super important. And I put together like a little kit. So if tattooers want it, they can have it. And so things like that definitely come from my sort of background at uni. And I just nerd out on that stuff, man. I just love that shit so much.
Yeah, so if you didn't do tattoos now, you think you'd probably be working within that creative space, doing the photography or the graphic design type stuff?
Probably more so the graphic design. I mean, I worked as a graphic designer at a printery for a bit, and it was the most soul-crushing job I ever had.
Yeah.
It was, designing business cards for some local lawn mowing business where they're standing over your shoulder, designing by proxy, telling you make
more
that
grass.
Smaller. Yeah, dude, more, yeah, Comic Sans, all that sort of stuff. It was pretty soul crushing. So I think I wouldn't hack it as a graphic designer if I didn't have almost complete freedom.
Yeah.
Where now it's like I'm designing shit for myself, so I have complete freedom, can do what I want, and it's really fun.
When you say like you see apprentices now, not to jump forward too much, but as someone who's not a tattooer but spent a lot of time in the shops and see how it works, do kids still do apprenticeships? It seems like a lot of people now are just kind of like, yeah, I've done a few tattoos and now I'm a tattooer. Is the apprenticeship thing? I felt like it kind of went by the wayside a little bit.
Yeah, it's tricky because I feel like it's definitely going to be different in a big metropolitan area like Sydney or Melbourne as opposed to out in the sticks. But a lot of people, you're finding a lot of self-taught tattooers, equipment has come such a long way, so it's easier to do a better tattoo straight away than like way back in the day when they had to make their own needles and shit like
YouTube
that.
tutorials.
Dude, yeah, the age of information, so they can just get any sort of info, but those people are still falling short and they're finding themselves in, I don't know, sort of like not as much respect for the craft in a way where it's sort of like you need to know about what came before you in order to respect it. And also, like if you're an apprentice and you have to scrub tubes and do all the shit jobs, when it comes a time where you're no longer an apprentice and the shop has a new apprentice, you appreciate what they're doing so much more. If they're scrubbing your tubes and doing that sort of stuff, you're like, oh man, that's the shittest job ever. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Because you've been there, you've done it, you've mopped the floors. It's kind of like a work ethic thing that it instills in you.
And it's for the mentors then, it's probably they're more likely to share some knowledge and actually give a shit what the apprentice is doing because they've been there themselves. It's like a full cycle kind of thing.
Totally. But like at the same time, there's a lot of places, there's shops that you'd probably call an apprentice factory where they're basically dangling the carrot of an apprenticeship to people, getting them in for scab labor, just using them, with the promise of an apprenticeship, and then fire them before the person ever actually learns to do a tattoo, and then they get someone else in, they get someone else in.
It's like an intern fucking rollover.
Yeah, man, and they're preying on these people that desperately want to get into the industry, and they don't know about that particular shop, and they're just like, fuck yeah, it's a foot in the door, I'll do what I have to do to get into it, and they just get chewed up and spat out. And it's really sad to see, and it's like disheartening for them, and then they just sworn off it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that going on too. So I feel like people going for an apprenticeship, it's like you want to genuinely respect the person that you're going to learn from, like build a relationship with them first. And, you have to like them and they have to like you for it to work.
Yeah. And it must be hard. You've got to put yourself into the situation of a lot of kids who probably want to do an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
You're living in Melbourne. You're probably paying $250 a week rent.
Yeah.
You don't have 40 hours a week that you can donate for next to nothing just to learn. So that puts them in a tough position as well.
Yeah. And I think also being in Melbourne, because there's so many shops and so many epic tattooers, you can afford to be a bit niche. So it's like, whereas if you're working way out in the burbs, you kind of have to be versatile and do a little bit of everything, which is great. It's so good because all of those things are going to benefit what you eventually want to specialize in later on. But now it's like people that want to apprentice in Melbourne, they want to go to the big dog shops where it's the people with 50,000 Instagram followers and they want to work there and they want to start tattooing immediately and they want to start doing the cool shit straight away. And then when they don't get that, they're like, man, this is shit.
Yeah, you've got to earn your stripes.
Yeah, sort of. But again, I don't know whether that's just like a city thing or if that's just sort of the age that we're in where everything's instant now, like Netflix, Uber, Amazon, all this sort of stuff. You just have it at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Tinder, for fuck's sake, like all these things. So I don't know whether it's just the sign of the times or whether it's like a metropolitan sort of.
Yeah,
thing.
but I think it would come back to the personal branding as well because you've got to put yourself. You think if you're a studio and you've got apprentices that are coming in. If an apprentice comes in with an established brand, potential customers and 5,000 Instagram followers, they're going to look like they're in a better stead than somebody who's just rolled in and said, "I like drawing."
Yeah, that's true. And there's that where they're like, oh, well, this person already has a following, and I mean, I feel like it shouldn't be a factor.
But it would.
But it 100% is, man. And a lot of these people, you know, have a pretty decent art following to begin with. So they've got a leg up. And then if you're a business owner, you'd be like, well, they've already got people that are buying their art outside of this. That's customers for the shop. This person, it could be an attribute and bring people to the shop. Not saying that that's essential, because you can see potential in someone. You can look at a portfolio and the last page of their portfolio is streets ahead of the first page, and you're like, okay, how long did you work on this over? Oh, over the course of a year. Man, look at how much they progressed in a year. How much are they going to progress in 2 years, 3 years, whatever? Cool. Let's get in on the ground level with this kid. They're going to be big, you know, but potentially.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back to tattooing. How does tattooing in Wagga Wagga differ from when you did come to the Big Smoke? Like, what kind of tattoos are you doing out there? I'm guessing everything, but there'd be a lot of same kind of. Was there a specific style?
Yeah, it was a lot of everything. You know, it was such a busy shop where you're doing, you know, 7 or 8 tattoos a day.
Because I guess people are coming from neighbouring towns and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many small towns around there that don't have tattoo shops, so it's like they're going to Wagga. And then like we'd have people from Canberra come all the time. It's like 3 hours away or something. Because Canberra had a lot of the same kind of stuff at the time. It was a lot of bikie shops and it was a lot of like black and grey. So if someone wanted a mandala, they'd come and they'd see Dan in Wagga because he'd do good mandalas or whatever. And people from South Coast, people would come from all over, Albury to Wagga to get tattooed. But probably the most common thing at that time was infinity symbols. It was there was a couple of years where I was probably doing at least one a day.
On the ankles and stuff?
Yeah, for sure. All that sort of stuff. Those terrifying, high-pressure little Pinterest tats that are the hardest things to do. They get
single fine line things.
Dude, there's no margin for error. And they get handballed to the apprentice as well because they're the little quick ones, you know. Doing those, dream catches were huge. But yeah, you know, you'd have to do a little like black and grey pocket watch, and then you'd have to do some script. You'd have to learn lettering. You'd have to do all that sort of stuff because I was taught script is the biggest moneymaker, you know. If you can do it, it's quick and, you know, it's easy and the customer's stoked because it's, you know, someone's getting a name, their dad's name on them who passed away or something. If you can sit down and write that out in some nice calligraphy and smash it out in between your other appointments, then they're going to be so stoked, so grateful. And it's a good money earner for the shop too. So it was a lot of everything. Like no one wanted traditional when I started tattooing.
Yeah, because we're talking sort of, what, mid-20 teens when you...
I started tattooing full-time 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you saw the trend change from what was predominantly black and grey to then what something was a bit more traditional. Did that become popular, or that's not until you get to Melbourne?
It wasn't so much that a trend changed because people were still getting that. There was like Brian Brady, who worked with us, was doing all the large-scale black and grey stuff. It's like, cool, he's the man for that. That goes to him. If he's busy and it's small, cool, I'll have a fucking run at it, you know. But I was trying to do like Sailor Jerry tats because at the time I still hadn't been exposed to too much traditional stuff, and I was like, oh, Sailor Jerry's traditional, and I was trying to do those for free on mates and just so I'd have a traditional tattoo to post. And then once you start posting stuff, people see it, they like it, and you can sort of get more of it. So by the time I like 2018 I left Wagga towards the end of 2018. In that year I was probably doing 60% traditional by that point and 40% everything else.
So you're happy with that ratio then?
I would have preferred 100% traditional, but it was good. Like for me at that time, I was stoked that it went from no traditional tattoos to that. That was cool. And then moving to Melbourne, I moved to St Kilda. I worked at a shop called Man's Ruin, and it was predominantly traditional. It was a fairly traditional shop. There was a couple of people that did other stuff, but you go in and there's traditional flash on the ceiling, on the walls, everywhere. So, yeah, people were coming there. And I think I said earlier, there's so many tattooers, it's like you can afford to be niche. So if someone wants a traditional tattoo, they're going to go to a shop where the guys do traditional tattoos.
Yeah.
And I was in heaven, man. You know, it's like, fuck, man, I did like 2 panthers this week. This is sick, you know? So, yeah, it was cool. So there was a big change. And you're still doing walk-ins. Being in St Kilda, a lot of backpackers and stuff like that. You're doing palm trees. You're doing little curly waves and stuff like that. But it's, yeah, it was a big change.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that was one of the, well, in St Kilda, the one that I can think of is the first like predominantly traditional sort of shop.
Yeah, there was, I think when I was there was also Voodoo on Carlisle Street.
Which has been there, like I lived in St Kilda for a lot of my life.
Yeah.
And that's been there since I was like a kid.
Yeah, it's over 20 years old for sure. It's since closed down and Man's Ruin moved into that location now.
Oh, so that's where it is now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like when Man's Ruin first opened, it was like Pete Pav and Mikey Sharks and Leonie New and Shannon Hodgkin and stuff. And they all came from Voodoo.
Yep.
And opened Man's Ruin. And now they're back in the, like now it's Mikey and Pete and a bunch of other people, but now they're back in the Voodoo location, which is like full circle for them, which is cool.
Yeah, for sure. And Leonie went to Chapel Tattoo and then she opened her own one
in Castlemaine.
Castlemaine, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's really cool. It was like that location, that original location of Man's Ruin, it was wild, you know. You'd remember being in that situation.
I grew up on that tram line and I've seen a lot of stuff. And St Kilda, if anything, man, I've spent most of my life there. It's worse in some parts than it was 20 years ago.
But I love it.
Yeah.
Like there's this weird thing where it's like, it's a beautiful suburb. Like some of the buildings, you know, the Espy or the George on Fitzroy Street, like some beautiful buildings. And like, I wouldn't swim in the water at the beach, but you know, it's pretty. Like, and especially coming from inland New South Wales, I loved the fact that I could catch a tram to work and I'd see the water every morning and see it on my way home. And it was like, there was something meditative about it where it's like, oh, you realize how small and insignificant you are in a good way, where it's like, it was the perfect way to start and finish every day was just seeing the water. And
you'd also be sort of thankful for what you got because you see people around you that obviously, I know that not from a selfish perspective, but it makes you appreciative because you see people that are probably doing it pretty tough all the time.
Yeah, it's a weird suburb because there's like the rich and affluent sort of celebrities and stuff that live in St Kilda, and then there's the homeless and the junkies and all sorts of stuff. You know, it's like two extremes, which I think, I don't know, made the suburb so interesting. And it's like every day you're like, fuck knows what's going to happen today, you know?
Oh man, there's always something going on there. And like it got to the point where I would walk with my partner and she wouldn't walk down Fitzroy Street because it was like a ghost town. Yeah. And like, people would just be asking you for money and harassing you and that sort of thing. Yeah. And she wouldn't want to walk down there in the end, which is sad.
Yeah. Yeah, out the front of that 7-Eleven, people just trying to attack you for no reason. And
we walked past one day and she's like, I'm pretty sure that guy's dead. And she goes, go and check. I'm like, I'm not going to go check if he's dead. I don't think he was. I think he was nodding out.
He's
but
sleeping. He's sleeping.
Didn't look good.
Yeah, give him a chalky milk. You'll be fine. Yeah.
So is there any specific individual stories you can think of from when you were at Man's Ruin that just sort of sum up that time when you were there? Like anything that happened that you think, fuck, man, that is a crazy one, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there was a pub on the corner called Fifth Province, Irish pub. Mm-hmm. Go there all the time. Yep. And one time I was tattooing and I saw the manager of the pub just running. And I'm like, that's weird. I've never seen him run before. And he was being chased by two guys. And
is it Finn?
It was Finn.
Finn, yeah, I know Finn, yeah.
And then he kicks
I've never seen him run before. That's really funny.
Yeah, he like kicked one of them in the chest to get a bit of distance between them. I was like, fuck. And I went out there just trying to like diffuse the situation a little bit. People in their apartments filming, stuff like that. And it's like, Pete always told us, it's like, if you have to go out there, the double glove. And I'm like, I don't think an extra pair of gloves is going to fucking help you. You know, people spit, stuff like that. So like shit like that would happen a fair bit. You'd have customers and you'd think that they've no-showed you, but they're actually just up near the Woolies and they're just seeing like a pretty dicey situation happening in front of the shop and they're just like, didn't feel comfortable walking past, which was fair enough. It's like, I'll come get you, you know? Yeah. So stuff like that, pretty regular. Someone, a four-wheel drive, like pulled up onto the footpath and a guy with a balaclava got out, went into the Fifth Province with a gun and was just like, this is a fucking warning or whatever, and then left. And then everyone was just kind of like, who was that to? Who was he warning? And then it was like, was it to the pub? And they're like, no. And then it's like, it was the most unclear situation. And everyone was just like, well, that was fucking weird. Everyone was pretty rattled by it. But it was like, that, you know, be more specific. Who are you warning?
Crazy stuff, man. I didn't spend much time at Fifth Province, but Freddy's across the road. I was there a lot. And you'd see some crazy shit.
I think I've done one of your trivia things.
I think you probably have. Mm-hmm. I used to host it there myself back in the day.
Yeah.
That was a while ago now. All right, we're going off topic.
My bad.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So let's talk about, what should we talk about now? We're moving on. Let's talk about St Kilda. You were there at Man's Ruin for a while, and then I guess after a while you thought, time for a change, or what sort of led you to think, oh yeah, it's time to do something different?
Yeah, I think I needed a lifestyle change. I was quite a party boy at the time.
Yep.
And it wasn't sustainable. And like a lot of the guys there partied pretty hard as well, and they could sustain it, and I couldn't. So yeah, I sort of was going to go to another shop, and then that fell through sort of around pandemic time, and I just happened to be at the pub with my mate Justin Stubbs in Port Melbourne, and he's like, just come to Corpus. And he just sort of bought into Corpus at the time. Steve Cross used to own it, who's a legend in both Melbourne street art and in tattooing. So Justin bought into that, and then he was like, dude, just come work at Corpus. I was like, yeah? He's like, yeah. And I just started there the next day. So it was a pretty seamless transition, but then it was such a pain in the ass, like commuting from St Kilda East via public transport to Brunswick every day.
Yep.
And so I just moved closer, and I've been at Corpus since the beginning of 2020, I think, and then the world died.
It did. It's interesting, as someone who's spent most of my time in St Kilda, it often happens the way that you sort of said, people move from a country town to St Kilda or Paran.
Yeah.
They stay there for 3 or 4 years, and then they end up going north side, and you followed that template pretty well there.
Yeah. It's weird. And it's the whole north side, south side sort of debate. I still don't really get it, because it's like, if there's a gig on south side, I'll go. It's 20 minutes in an Uber. Sweet. I don't give a fuck. But now it's like, people that live north side, they're like, oh man, I don't go that side of the river. Oh, those people are wankers or whatever. And it's like so crazy how divisive it is.
Yeah.
Whereas like in Wagga, you know, there wasn't even Ubers when I lived there. It was like you had to get a taxi. You're paying like $30-40 in a taxi to get back to uni, which is like kind of over the bridge out of town a bit. So it's like the fact I can jump on a tram and, you know, maybe not touch on and go anywhere for free.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that's fucking sick. Why would I not do that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think as I've moved down here further, now when I go to the city, I realise how close everything was.
Yeah.
It felt so far away, but when you do move a bit further out, you're like, fuck, we had it good. Everything was right there.
Yeah, you find yourself in your bubble, don't you?
Yeah.
You've got your restaurants, your bars, your cafes that you like. You stick to those, and then the thought of, going to the other side of the city to go to South Yarra for something just seems too impossible for some people.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So when you went to Corpus, are you now you're not doing as many travel sort of backpacker tattoos, you're now more doing just traditional stuff, and you can kind of pick and choose your gigs a little bit more?
Yeah, so Corpus, the original location in Trupovich Street where I started working, was kind of like a semi-private studio. Like it still had a bit of a shop front, but it was in an alleyway. So it was pretty discreet and didn't really look like a tattoo shop on the outside. So you weren't really getting walk-ins there anyway. Yep. You had to really provide your own work, you know, generate your own business. And then we moved a bit over a year ago now to the new location, which is further up Sydney Road, across from like Barclay Square Shopping Centre. And now it's full private studios. So you have to be entirely self-sufficient to generate your own work. So it's, you know, that's why you got to sell yourself, you know, marketing, all that sort of stuff to get business in, because you can't just rely on a backpacker walking in and wanting a bit of script on their ribs or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. And that must be a cool spot to be in from a tattooist or artist perspective, because you are just working with clients that you want to work with, and you're only just doing what you want to do to an extent. I'm sure there's a lot of client input there, but you can sort of push them into a different direction or push them into your own style. They know what they're getting when they ask for you.
Yeah, and definitely. And like, I remember years ago when I was at Man's Ruin and just watching Mikey Sharks with his customers, you know, and they'd come in and he hasn't seen them in 2 years, and then immediately it's like they're best friends and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, how do you remember all this shit? Like, I have the worst memory. How do you remember the last conversation you had with them when it was 2 years ago? He goes, man, my customers are fucking legends. He goes, I genuinely love my customers. And at the time, I didn't really get it. And now I get it. You know, a lot of the people that I'm tattooing now have a lot of the same interests and stuff like that. And I genuinely look forward to them coming in and catching up. You know, it's sort of the only time I'll catch up with these people. So I completely understand. And it's like, fuck yeah, I've got this dude in today. He's absolute legend, you know? Like, I love that shit. And yeah, it makes a big difference. And I think a lot of that is through social media, like whatever you're putting out there, people are obviously connecting with, like outside of the tattoos, you know, in whatever else you're putting out there, they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm into that shit too. Sweet, I'm going to go get tattooed by him. Because I feel like there's a bit of the ice has already been broken a little bit. They can sort of connect and relate to you a bit.
Yeah. Instagram, out of all the social media platforms, is awesome for that sort of stuff as well. And even like if you've got if you've got a client coming in, you can jump on their Instagram that morning, see what they've been up to, and then you've got stuff to, oh man, you went to that gig or you painted this thing, you know what I mean? So it's awesome for that. Like, it's got a lot of shit stuff about Instagram, but there's some real positives like that.
I'll do that. I'll be like, oh, they went to this gig or whatever, and then I'll put that music on when they come to the shop.
Ooh.
Seems a bit creepy, but I mean, like they rock up wearing a La Dispute t-shirt. We'll chuck La Dispute on, something like that, you know. And it's like tiny little things add to their experience when they're at the shop.
Yeah. And there's a bit of you remember the old sort of the old joke about hairdressers, they know all the gossip, but I think tattooers now is like, you go get your hair done, you might be there at a barbershop for 40 minutes, but you might be getting a tattoo for 6 hours, so you definitely you hear the gossip.
Yeah, man. Yeah, 100%.
You're a therapist of sorts sometimes?
Oh, yeah, glorified hairdresser, I'd say, for sure. It's and also, like, it's cool, especially doing American traditional sort of stuff. The nature of it is that a lot of people are just getting sort of palm-sized or hand-sized things, and they're collecting. So they collect off so many different tattooers. So, you know, it's like, I'll have regulars, but they're also, this dude's regular and this dude's regular. So they'll come in, I'll be like, all right, show us, what'd you get off him? Yeah, sick. You know, and I love that element of tattooing in Melbourne, because in Wagga it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
You know, it was very much the other two shops are rivals, they're competitions. We don't associate, we don't talk with them, you know, whereas in Melbourne it's like, oh, you got tattooed by my mate, give us a look, that's sick. You know?
I love that, and I'm one of those people that gets tattooed from a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've thought that before, when I'll go in and someone will come in and say, who did this one? Who did that one? Even sometimes that are artists that aren't tattooing you that day because they're trying to learn.
Yeah.
And I've been to get tattooed by other people and they've never asked that question.
Yeah.
And I just have in the back of my mind, are they really that into it? You'd think that they'd ask, who did that? Or that's cool. Or where was that? You know?
Yeah.
And I think that I'll tell you off air, a couple of people that haven't done that. And that just made me think maybe they're not that passionate about it as some of the other artists.
Yeah. Like, it's weird. I've like, there's the phrase like tattoo industry, but I'd say it more as like a tattoo community than an industry.
Yep.
In a sense, where it's like we're all in this together, we're all like doing the same thing, and I want to know what other people are doing. I want to see the other tats. You know, it's like it's interesting. Like I like. I mean, I don't know whether I should say it, but I'd fucking tattoo for free, you know, as long as it meant I got to do tattoos, because I just love it so much.
Yep.
You know, like, even if it wasn't a profession that you couldn't make a living from, I'd still want to do it. So the fact that I get to make money from it is a bonus as far as I see it. So I'm so excited just looking at other people's tattoos and being like, fuck, that's sick. You know?
For sure. I was at a shop the other day and one of the dudes were talking and he said that if he won the lottery, he'd still tattoo a few days a week.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's fucking cool. That means that your business is something you are that passionate about.
Yeah.
You know, that's someone
100%.
who's passionate.
100%. Like, I feel like there's a weird similarity between like tattooing and golf, in the sense that it's like,
It's in your blood.
Yeah, 100%, man. And it's like, everything you do, you're like, I can improve on this element of it. And then you sort of get a little bit addicted to that improvement, that self-improvement aspect, where it's like, if you're golfing and you're slicing it all the time, you need to remedy that somehow. There's a specific thing you can do, open your club face, whatever, that's going to correct your shot. It's like, you do a tattoo, you sit there and you obsess over the photo for fucking ages before you put it on Instagram, if you put it on Instagram. And there'll be one little thing, it's like, I can do that better.
Yeah.
Give me another one, I can do it better.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I think it's that's like, oh man, I'm not going to stop tattooing, because it's like, I want another one. I want another one.
I would liken that to skateboarding. That makes more sense to me than golf. I'm not a golfer,
dude,
but yeah.
100%. Yeah.
That kickflip could have been flatter, or I could have got a better ollie there, or my toe dragged on this, a few things like that you could do to progress, and you know that, and you keep trying,
and then you see someone else do something you haven't done, and you're like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the traditional tattoos, like obviously they all kind of come from the same. Well, okay. How would you? I was halfway through asking a question, but I'll change. I'll change it.
Yeah.
How would you describe your style? What would you say you do?
Traditional.
Just traditional.
I'd say so.
Because there's different veins of traditional.
100%. Yeah, and traditional. It's inspired by images from a certain era, that wartime kind of era. So a lot of them were sailors and soldiers and stuff like that.
Which is more American traditional, because there's different traditionals?
Well, that's the thing. That's why I feel like I can't specify American traditional, because I'll reference American stuff. I'll reference English stuff. I'll reference Australian stuff.
Yep.
So by saying traditional, it's a sort of broad umbrella, but basically you're referencing the people that came before you and the images that came before you, and then just putting your spin on it. But basically it's like, a crawling panther, those guys back then, a lot of them weren't artists, so to speak. They were just ripping shit out of children's books, circus posters, magazine ads or whatever, and then just slapping it on the wall, making it a tattoo.
And Flash would be shared around. I guess they would probably sell books of Flash with tattoo machines and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, all the production sheet stuff. So it's like, a panther was cool 60 years ago. A panther's still fucking cool. It's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, It's like you're continuing the tradition of that design because it's just so sick.
Cool. Yeah. I'd say panther is probably one of the coolest tattoos you could get. I
think it's the ultimate. We have a competition going at work to see who can do the most crawling panthers on top of a forearm at the moment. Right. I'm winning. And
with how many?
Look, this is frustrating because we had like a pretty strict rule set on it of what qualifies as like a regulation panther, and I've done so fucking many panthers that haven't met the stipulations. So it has to be an upwards or downwards crawling panther on top of the forearm. The only sort of variation is with a snake wrapped around it.
Okay.
But like, I've done so many on legs, ribs, inside a forearm, all these things, a tiger, a leopard, none of those count. So I think I've got maybe like 5 or 6, which doesn't seem like that many. I've probably done 30 this year, but 6 count, Wow. And I have a customer that is a trophy maker. He's like, can I make a trophy for this competition? I was like, fuck yeah, you can. Yeah. And then it arrived one day at work when I wasn't there in this huge box, and it's the heaviest, most obnoxious fucking thing ever.
Is it shaped like a panther?
Dude, it's a full brass panther.
That's sick.
It's rad. I don't know where he got the brass panther from, but it's obscene how big and heavy this thing is, and it has a plaque on the back for us to engrave the winner's name each year.
Fuck, that's awesome, man.
Because, I spat everywhere. Because the panther is the ultimate fucking tattoo, man.
Yeah, I'd probably have to agree with you on that. Yeah. But so this sort of leads me to a question that if you are referencing past artists and past tattoos, at what point do you have to change them to a degree to make them your own? Or with something like a panther, can you just textbook copy it, that is the panther, we don't need to fucking make it our own?
Yeah. There's arguments for both. Everyone's different. There are some tattooers out there that do the classics perfectly. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're just, that's how it was. I'm going to do the best version of that, which is sick. And then there are other people that sort of like mong it out a bit and get a bit weird with it and put their own flavor.
I've got a mong panther.
Epic. Epic. But it's like there's people that you go to because they're doing the weirdest shit, but it's still you still know the reference, or they're doing something completely original, but it's still in the wheelhouse of traditional in like how it's done, but it's like their own, came from their imagination, and it's still technically traditional because it's fitting the sort of the rules of traditional in a way, bold lines, minimal color palette, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But then there's other people, it's like, dude, you've done the Eamon Dietzel snakehead, exactly how it was. Like, that's sick.
That's sick. Yeah. So how do you deal with people that would come in with references maybe of another artist that isn't it's a traditional style tattoo, but
Yeah.
it may not be of a traditional artist.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want that. You're like, am I kind of biting this guy's style a bit too much if I make it too similar to that? If it's not that old as an actual design?
Like if it's a traditional tattoo, well, if they've referenced a classic image, I'll just go, okay, I'll go to the original that they referenced.
Back to the drawing board.
Yeah, as opposed to referencing their tattoo. It's like, cool, that's a Percy Waters design that they've referenced. I'll go to the Percy Waters design and reference that as opposed to their tattoo specifically.
Okay.
It's at the point now because there's so many epic tattooers. It's like, there are traditional tattooers with more muted color palettes, more vibrant color palettes. So, if someone comes to me, they're coming to me for the colors that I use. No one's coming to me being like, yeah, but can you use Kirk Jones's color palette? Or was it, go Kirk Jones. If you want those colors, go see him.
Yeah.
He's fucking amazing. So there's, I don't know. I feel like everyone's real chill about it. They're kind of like, yeah, I really like how this panther looks like. Panther's always the example.
Yeah.
How this panther looks like this or whatever. I'm like, sweet, I got you. Cool.
Yeah.
No worries. I'll reference the original. And then sometimes I like to find the source material that tattooer all those years ago referenced from.
Yep.
Like I got given the children's book, Minutes, Myths and Legends, that the original Crawling Panther is in.
Wow.
So it's like my most prized possession. You know?
Wow. Like an original pressing of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, in like amazing condition.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's sick. So have you noticed within the traditional space that colours are becoming used less and less? Like I'm seeing that sort of happen in the last few years where I don't know if we call it a trend, but it seems to be that people are getting less colour, more like traditional's always bold, but even more bold, stronger black, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's still kind of 50-50, but black trad is pretty prevalent. And I feel like a lot of girls generally that I've noticed opt more towards like black traditional as opposed to color. And when I ask them, it's because it clashes with outfits, or they can't wear a dress with patterns on it because of like the colors in tattoos are going to clash with
it. You've got a cool blue, purple color scheme. It's not going to go with your pink dress or something like that.
So like chicks will sort of tend to be like, oh, black's just a bit more versatile in my personal style or whatever with clothing and shit. So that's a factor
something
that
I've never ever fucking thought of.
Right. So yeah. So like maybe that's a factor. It also like geographically as well, you might go up to Queensland and more people are getting like black over color because they're in the sun more and they feel like, oh, I don't want the colors to fade. But the inks have come a long way, and if you look after your skin, it's sweet. But there's still that sort of mentality that color's going to fade. So I feel like up north, a lot of people might tend to get black over color. But we're all pretty pasty here in Melbourne, so I think colour's alive and well.
We like a black and white anyway.
Yeah.
Everyone wears
the
black
black's
and
just blacker.
Black. How do you feel about, now there used to be, I've been getting tattooed for 15, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Now there used to be a little bit of a law, not a law, but a law, LORE. You had to get this tattoo before you could get this tattoo before you could get this tattoo. As far as you needed to get a full sleeve before you got your hand tattooed, or you've got to do 2 sleeves before you get your neck tattooed. Yeah. Do those rules exist anymore?
When I apprenticed, they 100% did.
Yeah. Can you run through when you were an apprentice? What was the hierarchy or the level of steps you had to take?
Yeah. So like I feel like even 10 years ago, someone with full sleeves, you're like, fuck, that person's heavily tattooed. That's gnarly. But the line keeps moving as to what's extreme, So then it became, a lot of people then were getting their hands tattooed. Well, that's pretty intense. They've got their hands tattooed. They're never going to get a job with their hands tattooed. Then it was necks. Now it's heads and faces. And the real gnarly cunts are getting, sorry, I don't know if I can say that. But it's getting their eyeballs and shit. So it's like the line is continuously moving to be more and more extreme, to the point where you go to a tattoo convention and there's thousands of people in there and you see someone with their eyeballs tattooed in a room full of tattooers, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's fucking intense. That's extreme. Yeah. So it keeps moving, but it used to be, don't get your hands, neck, face tattooed. And then some people, they wanted it. It was like a shortcut. So if they were wearing long sleeves, it looked like they were heavily tattooed without having to put the hours in of getting tattooed. And it was called the Vans Warp Tour bodysuit, you know, or the scarf and mittens, you know. It's not a sleeve, it's a scarf and mittens. So, yeah, we'd flat out refuse. And it was always like you're doing it for the customer's sake, because it's like you could take their money and never see them again. Who gives a fuck? Which some people do. They like the ethics of it. They're like, I don't care. That's their decision. If they want to fuck their life up, they can do that. Who am I to tell them what they can and can't do? Which I don't necessarily subscribe to. It's like I feel like as a tattooer, you have a responsibility for that person. You know.
I've also had people use the justification that if they're gonna go and get a tattoo on their neck for their first tattoo, I may as well do it because I'll do a good job rather than them go to someone else and they'll do a shit job, which I can kind of understand.
I've heard that argument as well. Or it's like, well, they're going to do it anyway. We may as well make the money from it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Just makes me feel a bit gross.
But if a kid comes in who's 19 now that wants to get a panther on their hand and they don't have any other tattoos, are you going to do it, or you just try and steer them away from it? I've been in shops before where kids are like, I just want this here on my neck, and they're like, nah, you got to get one on your leg first or whatever. You've got to at least do a couple.
Yeah. I personally won't.
Yep.
I mean, if someone came in and they just wanted an initial on their finger, okay, a finger tattoo is fine. It's quite non-offensive. It may as well be a piece of jewelry at that point. Yeah. But yeah, doing a big hand tattoo, I'm like, nah, dude. Like, you're gonna look like a fucking idiot too, you know. So I don't want to be responsible for that. Other people will. That's their agenda. They can do it. Yeah. But I feel uncomfortable doing that kind of stuff. But it would always be, some young dude, 18, comes in, wants his last name on his neck, and it's like, fuck, man. Like, you know, the tattoos I got when I was 18, I wouldn't get now. You know, like you mature and you change and your taste changes and stuff like that. So it's like, you're not going to make, even your first tattoo isn't necessarily going to be a great decision. Yeah. Don't fuck your life up as a result. Maybe just listen to the person that knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think listening to the person who knows what they're talking about is another one, because I'll be in shops and then people will come in with these ideas and they have these crazy ideas. We're going to mix this with that. Yeah. And the artist will be like, that's a bad idea. You don't want to do it, but I'm sure you can. And they're like, yeah, I'm sure I can, but I'm sure it's going to look shit because it's a bad idea.
Yeah, 100%. Like half of the job is talking someone out of a tattoo. You know?
Ironically,
it sounds so counterintuitive, but it's true. Someone comes in and it's like, dude, I think it's a bad idea for X, Y, and Z. You know? And they leave and it's like, I feel good knowing that I didn't do that, and that hopefully they saw where I was coming from and they're going to go away and have a think about it, you know? Or even just like someone comes in and they're umming and ahhing about a design or whatever. I won't do it if they're unsure. I'll be like, yeah, it's fucked my day up a bit, you know? Now I'm not tattooing today, cool. But it's like...
you can sleep well at night.
I can sleep, it feels better on the conscience, you know? It's like, I haven't ruined someone's life, or they're not going to then resent a tattoo that I did because they weren't sure about it, got it anyway, and then realized, fuck, I wish I didn't
do it. Yeah. It's funny. People will come up to me and say, oh, I'm going to get a tattoo, but I don't know what I'm going to get yet. Or I want to get a sleeve, but I don't know what to get. I'm like, well, maybe don't get it then. Don't get it just because you want some coverage. Like, I think that's why tribal went out of fashion, because people were just going, give me a big... Totally. Unless you're in a tribe or something. But I think that fashion went out because people just wanted coverage quickly.
100%. That's exactly what that was. And then I feel like Dusk Till Dawn, George Clooney's patch in that.
That was the start of it,
That was the start of it. And then even the underbelly, the Benji Venison or whatever.
Benjamin,
Yeah, Benjamin, like venison. But like, those tattoos, people were just like, loads of coverage, doesn't mean anything. Sweet, I'll get it. I can just look tough immediately. And then, the tribal just exploded.
And I'm sure that there's a lot of cover-up jobs for those now.
It's so hard to cover, you know, without lasering it, because it's just so big and black. And it's like, if you're going to cover something, you got to go bigger and blacker, generally.
Generally, yeah. Have you had any laser yourself?
I've had laser, yeah.
It looks so fucking painful, man. Like just the way that the skin melts and
it sort of frosts over a bit. Yeah. Thankfully, I've only had sort of like smaller ones lasered. So it's been pretty manageable. And I think there's so many like misconceptions about laser and it scars and also doesn't. Go to a place that they know what they're doing. It's fine.
If you've got a solid sort of black outline tattoo, like let's not talk really thick, like tribal stuff. But if you've got a solid black tattoo, how many sessions would you sort of need for someone to go over it again?
Well, this is the crazy thing with laser. Black is the easiest to remove.
Really?
Yeah.
So yeah, right.
So when you think about it, black absorbs light. It's the reason why a black car is going to get hotter than a white car, right? So black's going to absorb the laser better than red, which is on a different wavelength, and green, which I think they're the two hardest colors to remove. They use a different beam, I'm pretty sure, for the red and the green than everything else. So black's the easiest to remove, and it basically, the light breaks up the ink particles in the skin, goes into the bloodstream and gets filtered by the liver and or kidneys or some shit, and you just piss it out. You piss out your tattoos through getting it lasered.
Can you see the color pigment, or it's not? Nah. It's not. That's fucking
That'd be wild.
Yeah, like you're pissing out letters and stuff.
Yeah.
So, man, that's what I had no idea about that. That's crazy that black is the easiest one to remove. But you still probably need three sessions or something of the laser.
It depends on what your goal is. If you you can just get it lasered a couple of times so it's light enough to then do a really good cover up, which I always kind of encourage people. Yeah. It's like, look, if you're so unhappy with that tattoo that you want it gone, you've had it for 10 years, what's a year of your life to then get a great replacement tattoo for it? Otherwise, you can keep going and pretty much completely remove it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a trend I've seen on Instagram where people might have these really big sort of black and grey back pieces, and instead of that have faded, say they're 15 years old, and instead of doing laser, they just do a really solid black traditional outline over the whole back piece. That's pretty cool.
I love it. I love a blast over.
Is that what it's called, a blast over?
Yeah. So there's a cover up where you're trying to hide whatever's underneath.
Yep.
And then a blast over, you just don't give a fuck. It's just a second coat, you just put something over the top. And it looks cool. Like all those old sort of like faded tattoos make great backgrounds on like a real solid traditional tattoo or tribal or sort of geometric stuff. Whatever it is, it's like as long as there's that contrast where it's very legible. Yeah. It looks awesome. It's a cool look.
Yeah, for sure. And there's no forward thinking to color that in. You just leave them as the black over the black.
I've done color blast overs. Really? For sure. Yeah, color blast overs work really good over faded sort of black and grey tattoos.
Yep.
You lose a lot of legibility if you're going over color. But then if you're going over like color, like faded color shit with just a strong black sort of design, you still have shading and stuff in there, but you just have to really up the contrast in the design so that it's really differentiated between what the old tattoo is and the new tattoo. Yeah.
How do you feel? Like, obviously now everyone's getting all sorts of tattoos, and I'm a culprit of it as well. But tattoos that have kind of lost their meaning, that so they had something else. Like, I've got a cobweb on my elbow, and because what else do you put on your elbow? I definitely haven't done any prison time, and people are like, "Oh, that used to be a thing that you did in prison." Like, where do you stand on that sort of thing with tattoos sort of losing their meaning, or are they just all art now?
There's definitely stuff that has connotations to it. But I feel like the whole, elbow web prison thing, I think they existed outside of prison and they just sort of utilized it to represent shit inside prison. Yeah. So like repurposed an existing thing for whatever agenda they have to express inside prison. I don't think it really matters, like I feel like as society has evolved, like you can express yourself however you want in a way, but there are like traditional designs from that era, wartime era, that are racist designs and shit like that. There's a lot of like anti-Asian sort of things from when like a bunch of like Chinese gold miners came over to America, and then they were like, man,
because they're warring with Japan at the time.
Like a bunch of shit like that. So there's designs like that if someone came in and they wanted like one of those designs, I'd be like, this is where that design came from. It's kind of not cool. Let's do something else. And then people will be like, oh shit, I didn't know that. Yeah, thank fuck I don't have that on me. So there's some designs like that. But I mean, elbow webs and prison and stuff like that, nah, they're sweet. It's the perfect elbow tattoo, really.
not going to do it just because I'm like, everyone's done that, and I've tried to think about other stuff.
Yeah.
And in the end, I'm like, fill that gap.
You
with
can't. It's the
phone
best.
call.
It's the best. Yeah, 100%.
So aside from being a tattooist, you're also the host of a podcast.
Yes.
True Love Tattoo Podcast. Man, I'm a fan. Do you want to
Thank
tell
you.
us how the idea from that came about and a little bit about the show, the podcast?
Yeah, man. So in 2018, I was still living in Wagga, and I had the plan to move to Melbourne. And I was like, man, there's so many. Like, Melbourne is the mecca of tattooing in the Southern Hemisphere, for sure. There's so many amazing tattooers here. How am I going to stand out? How am I going to get a leg up? How am I going to generate business? Everyone's a way better tattooer than me. I need to try and sell the experience of getting tattooed. How can I do that? I'll start a podcast because it's that sort of long form conversation, which is kind of like the conversations you have while you're getting tattooed.
But definitely, yeah.
So I'm like, cool, I can do that. And then basically get on a bunch of tattooers that, you know, people are interested in. They want to learn more from them, hear about their story. And by proxy, they're also kind of getting to know me a little bit through it. So hopefully the plan was that they'd watch it. They'd be like, I've never heard of this MJ Forrest dude. Oh, he sounds all right. Yeah. Oh, I'd get along with him. Check out my work. And then it generated business for me that way. So it was a bit of a scheme to generate business moving to Melbourne. And at the time, there was no Australian tattoo podcasts.
Right.
As I was doing it, I got really worried because Andrew Stortz in America started a tattoo podcast called Books Closed. And I was like, fuck. And his came out before mine did. And I was really worried. And then I realized the premise of his podcast is completely different to mine.
Yep.
And his podcast is amazing as well, but it was very different. I was like, okay, cool. I'm still good. And so mine was an Australian tattoo podcast, Australian tattooers. And it just sort of filled that niche. It was the right place, right time kind of thing. Called in favors from a bunch of tattooers that I was friends with. And then they'd come on, they'd then have to promote the podcast. So then I'm being exposed to all their followers, kind of piggybacking off them a little bit. But then, you know, there was a lot of traditional tattooers on the podcast. So then people that they like their tattoos, they'd then find me through them and then be like, oh, I like your stuff too. Then they'd come and get tattooed by me. So that was the original reason for doing it.
Yeah.
I had no plans to do more than 10 episodes.
Right. So it was just a one and done type thing, build a bit of a okay. And it's a good way for you to meet other people in the space in Melbourne that are in the same industry.
Yeah. Well, the first season, the only person that I didn't personally know was Hal Hunter. And we'd talk to each other on Instagram and stuff, but never met in person. Everyone else was already a buddy.
He's done a couple of these.
Yeah, he's a legend. And now he has a podcast, you know? So
Oh, right. Yeah. I
yeah.
didn't know.
So I was like, cool, I'll do that. And I finished it, done and dusted. And then got a bunch of work from it, which was great. I felt like mission accomplished. And then for 4 years, pretty much weekly for 4 years, people would be like, oh, bring back the podcast. Oh, are you doing any more of the podcast? Oh, yeah, what about the podcast? And I was like, fuck, okay. People liked it and it resonated with people. And then I just tell people, nah, like, not doing it anymore. Can't be fucked.
It's too hard work.
Yeah, dude, so much hard work. And it's like, there was just other shit I wanted to do. And then I got to a point where I'm like, okay, if I am going to do it again, I want it to be bigger. I want it to be better. There's so many things I want to improve on it. I'm not going to do it unless I can improve on those things. And then got to a point where I'm like, okay, I think I can do it. I think I know how I can do it. And then I basically just worked on it in secret for a while. And then I'm like, I'm just going to drop an episode just randomly 4 years after the last episode. And I'm like, and then the people that are already subscribed are going to get a notification. It's going to be sick. It's going to be genius. I did that. I shouldn't have done that. I should have fucking, advertised leading up to it. It was a terrible strategy.
But yeah, you didn't know until you gave it a go.
No, exactly.
It could have worked.
Exactly. And I was like, all right, well, cool. I'll do that differently next time. But yeah, I brought it back and we like improved the video side of things, the social media side of things, and yeah, just went a lot bigger. So it was to begin with, it was sort of like I'm doing this
a self-promotion
for me, and then did what I wanted it to do, and then a lot of people just liked it, and it means a lot to me that people liked it, and people will come and get tattooed by me, and they're like, yeah, man, like I found out about you through Reese Gordon's episode of your podcast and stuff like that. I'm like, well, that's sick, so I'm like,
it is tapping you straight into an audience because you've got to think that most of those people that are following these guests
Yeah.
have had tattoos or want to get tattoos by them.
Yeah.
So if you're all of a sudden associated with them, bang, 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 and did it work? Did your followers in your personal account like jump up every time you posted an episode?
Yeah.
It worked perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. It, like what I thought would happen happened, and it was sweet. And then that's why I was just like, cool, I've done that now. I don't need to keep doing it.
Yep.
But then I felt there's still an appetite for it, and since then a bunch of like I said, Hal's got a podcast now. Reese Gordon has a podcast now. So like two of my guests have started their own tattoo podcast.
Tattoo podcast.
Yeah, that are very different to mine as well. They've found their own lanes, which is sick. But now there's a bunch. There was the Blunt Mag tattoo podcast as well. So like, and I'm sure there's more. So I was like, oh well, I don't need to now. These guys have it covered. I can sit back. But people still wanted it. I think because it was a very sort of specific vibe to the show that people liked. And I'm like, all right, cool, I'll do it because people want it. So yeah, season 2 felt like it was more for them than it was for me. And season 1 was definitely for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Season 3?
Maybe.
No, there's nothing locked in?
Nothing locked in. Like, we're talking about it, but nothing's organized.
Yeah. So. I love the way that you started doing the whole podcast with a goal. I'm just doing it. I got no idea what the end game is, but I'm glad that you're like, this is going to build my brand, which was cool because you weren't thinking about monetizing it. You were thinking about getting something else out of it.
Well, yeah. Like if the podcast succeeded, I was getting work out of it, which, then I'm getting paid through tattoos, which is what I wanted.
Yep.
So that was the priority. Season 1, I self-funded. And as you know, it's a fucking expensive endeavor.
I'm in pretty fucking deep.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. So, and then season 2, I'm like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to get a sponsor to basically cover the cost. I wasn't making money on it, but I wasn't spending money on it.
Yeah.
I spent a bit of money. I spent money getting like the title sequence animated, and I bought furniture for it.
You couldn't barter tattoo time for that?
Well, it's a girl I went to uni with, and she lives in London now. She did animations for Google, for MTV, Nickelodeon,
does look good.
ITV. Yeah, she's legit. And I was like, hey, would you be keen to do this? And she's like, doing an opening title sequence for a podcast is like the dream. She's like, yeah, fuck yeah. So I think she hooked me up with mates rates, but it still wasn't cheap, and it shouldn't be. Like, she was amazing, and I'm so happy with it. Yeah. So like, if I do a 3rd season, I'll hit her up to do a new one, and keep it like fresh but consistent. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. I liked just doing the seasons because it was sort of how you're doing it, like recording weekly and putting them out weekly, all that sort of stuff is sick. But while I was trying to juggle tattooing at the same time, it wasn't necessarily sustainable. At least when I was doing it, I was doing 1 episode a week on my day off. And I was like, all right, cool. I only have to do this for 10 weeks. Yeah. In season 2, we banked all the episodes over 3 days. Yeah. So I only,
like a proper fucking TV show. You're shooting multiple episodes a day.
Yeah, I was changing outfits between episodes and stuff like that. So it was cool. I like that because I was like, I'm only just going to do a season a year or something, So I don't know. I'll probably like that structure was good because it was minimal time off from tattooing. Yeah. I tattoo 6 days a week and don't really take days off in amongst that. So I'm like,
do your hands fucking get sore, man?
No, my back is cooked. Just from sitting like a fucking idiot all day, every day. Yeah. Which I need to do something about. But no, hands are okay.
Do some Pilates or something.
One of the guys I work with, Dan, went to do Pilates. And I don't know what I thought Pilates was, but
it's just stretching.
Yeah, but like they're using some weights and shit like that. Like it seemed, I just thought it was kind of like yoga for mums.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And then he's like, no, it's really helped my back. And I'm like, oh, all right, maybe I should get onto that. So this year I've spent a lot more time focusing on my physical well-being.
Well, yeah, I think when you're doing a physical job and, obviously you've got to sit in some awkward situations. Sometimes you've got to lean. You're working with a human canvas. You've got to stretch their skin. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different things, I'm sure. And you can't, if you're sore, you can't be, I'm too sore today. You just got to push through.
Yeah, because if you cook yourself and then you can't, like it happened when I worked at Man's Ruin. I hurt my back and I had to take a little bit of time off, not too much. I went back before I was meant to, but I had to go to a chiropractor twice a week for 10 weeks to try and remedy this situation that I had caused myself.
Man, I have a really sore back and I went to an osteo like 3 times.
Yeah.
And it was magic. She like fixed it.
Yeah.
And it's not like come back every week. She's like come back 2 times and just told me to do this, do that. You're sitting the wrong way and like fucking nailed it. And I don't get a sore back anymore.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I think mine came from, I had knee surgery when I was like 17, that like pretty gnarly knee surgery.
Yep.
And then one leg's slightly longer than the other, and then the hips are off, and then the back, and I sit on my
That's
wallet
it.
a lot. It was just all those things.
The wallet was a huge thing, man, when I was a kid. I used to sit on my wallet.
I'm doing it now.
I put it in my front pocket when I started 21. I put it in my front pocket.
Yeah.
You've got the Costanza number there too. So it's but you got to think that's going to throw you off an inch.
100%.
So which throws your whole body out of kilter.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to look after your body, man.
Thank you for reminding me to take it out of my pocket.
It's the first thing I do when I go anywhere. That's why I've lost so many wallets. And shit. I always just throw it. You've done a lot of guesting overseas as well. So you've guested at multiple different countries. I believe New Zealand, the US, the UK.
Haven't done the US yet.
Okay.
I want to do the US. I've tattooed in the UK and I've tattooed at a convention in New Zealand. The NZ Tattoo and Art Festival, I think it's called. It's in New Plymouth. So we did that last year. That was epic. And then I've tattooed The Family Business in London and Cloak and Dagger in London as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was most epic experience.
How do you tee up those sort of international ones? Is it through Instagram, social media, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I asked.
Oh, right.
It was that simple, man. And it's crazy. I feel like so many people's egos get in the way where they want like a handwritten invitation, and it's like they don't want to ask because of that fear of rejection. Mm-hmm. And it's like, cool, man. If they say no, I'm in the exact same situation I'm in now. I got nothing to lose by hitting them up and asking for a guest spot. The worst they can do is say no. Yeah. And then they said yes, and I was like, all right, sweet, cool. I'll book a trip. I'll go over.
And I guess it's like anything. Once you've done it once, then other people see, oh, he's guested at this shop. Oh, yeah, well, we could get him to guest at this one. And then it flows organically.
Yeah, and you make friends there as well. And it's like there's people from those shops that I talk to weekly, where it's like I just want to go back and see my mates now, you know. So, it's such a cool thing. Like back in the day, people used to have to send letters, like to Canada, to a shop to organize it. Like travel was so uncommon back then. There was like very few people doing it. Yep. So if someone did, it was like, fuck, that's monumental. And now with social media, people are going on tours, like around the country or overseas, throughout Europe, whatever. And it's like they're booking out their guest spots purely through social media.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is cool. It's one of the good things about social media.
So social media is great. It's shit as well. It's a double-edged sword, but it's it's a tool. If you're using it as a tool, it's amazing. You can achieve so many things through utilizing it. Yeah.
So how does tattooing in London differ from here in Australia? Like obviously you're only doing a guest spot and you're probably booking yourself out, so you're just doing traditional. But are all the practices and everything kind of the same as here?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I felt like the biggest difference is the price point, the cost of tattoos over there versus the cost of tattoos here.
Because of the pound?
Yeah, it was so strange. I don't know whether this is like a weird thing to say on a podcast, but it's like generally like if I'm doing like a palm size sort of traditional tattoo, it's around like $350, right? Right. That could change in 10 years if someone's watching this podcast then, who knows? But for now, it's, I charge around $350 for like a palm size tattoo. Over there, I was like, I don't know how much to charge. I don't want to undercut. I don't want to overcharge. Like asking people at the shop, can you help me? What should I charge for this? And they're like, oh, like $350. I'm like, no, in pounds. And they're like, yeah.
Which is $1,000 for a palm size tattoo, basically.
It may as well be, yeah.
Well, the exchange rate, it depends. Yeah,
it was over 600 for sure. And I was like, are you fucking? I felt terrible. Like I felt awful charging these people because it's like
a week's wage for.
Totally, but people were like, oh yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Or like I have friends that have tattooed in the States, and the same thing. It's like tattoos are so expensive over there, and then people are tipping on top of that, tipping 10 to 20%. And then I'm like, how do people in these countries have tattoos? Yeah. Especially when they're working jobs where they're getting paid fuck all as well. I'm like, it blows my mind. Yeah. And it's like, it's not necessarily that the equipment or materials that they're using are costing more. If anything, they're probably cheaper over there than in Australia. Like, how? Like, how is this? Yeah, it blew my mind. That was the weirdest adjustment.
Is it because it's a competitive space over here, or what do you put it down to? Or was it also potentially because you're working at very reputable shops that probably have a higher price point than some of the lower end shops?
That maybe that could be a thing, but I think like generally over there it's more expensive. I think maybe when you look at like the cost of living in London, rent is like sometimes I'll just look up how much it costs to rent an apartment over there. I couldn't afford it. You know, it's like how does anyone afford it?
If you're making 600 quid a tattoo, maybe you could.
Yeah, maybe, maybe then. But it's mental. So it's like, and then you think of like the shops over there, like the retail spaces. It's like how much the shop is paying in rent each week. So maybe just the expenses are so much higher, so they're charging more to cover that side of things.
Yeah.
Which in Melbourne you'd be like, oh man, rent is a lot to have a shop. That's a lot of money to rent a shop. All that sort of stuff. So it's just so dramatically higher over in cities like that.
So talking about the rent of a shop and all those kind of overheads, as a truck rolls past, which hopefully I can edit out that sound. As talking about that, do you have any ambitions to eventually open your own shop? You're happy working for other people, that sort of thing?
I will never own a shop. On
record, you're saying you'll never own a shop.
I will never own a shop.
Too stressful?
Too stressful, man. I don't know. It's weird. Like when I talk to older people that aren't in tattooing, they're like, so are you going to open a shop one day? And I'm like, nah. And they're like, why? And I feel like for so many people, success is owning a house, owning a shop, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Having people work for you they're like, that's the
pinnacle.
highest, the pinnacle, the highest rung on the ladder, the summit of the mountain. That's like, you've made it.
Yep.
It doesn't appeal to me.
Yep.
It's so much stress and effort and risk and all that sort of stuff. It's like, you own a shop. That's your name. That's your reputation. You could have someone that works for you that gets cancelled, and that's a reflection on the shop. And that's something out of your control that someone else has done that then impacts you and your livelihood. Fuck that, you know? And it's like having all these sort of commitments and like Justin Stubbs, who I work with, one of my best friends, he owns a shop and he's the youngest dude in the shop. It's crazy. And he's
got that ambition.
He's got that ambition. He's got that responsibility. He's got that maturity that I just don't have. He's so smart business-wise, with accounting, all that kind of stuff. I don't possess those skills. I feel like people-wise, like managing people, okay, maybe I could do that okay. But in the realities of owning a business, no way. I'm not cut out for it. I can't do maths. I can't do any of those things. So it's sort of like knowing your limitations and then leaning into the things that you're good at. And I just don't. It doesn't appeal. I'd much rather work with my best friend and help him wherever I can, and have so much pride in what he's built. And he bought into Corpus because Corpus has been around 16 years now. It's been around for so long, and it's always been one of those shops, one of those Melbourne shops, like when Steve had it, and before that it was Steve and Brian Graydon. So it's sort of like Steve wanted out. He wanted to just move back to Freo and just paint murals for the rest of his days, and just wanted out of tattooing. And then Stubbs and a couple of the guys that bought into it together at the time were like, well, Corpus can't die. Corpus is bigger than all of us. It's like, it's an institution at this point. So many people have like gone through those doors over the years.
Yep.
So many epic tattooers in Melbourne worked at Corpus at some point. So it's like they could have just opened their own shop if they wanted to, but the name Corpus was so much more important to them.
It was an institution.
100%. And they're like, Corpus can't die. And so 3 of them bought into it. Now it's just Stubbs that owns it on his own. And he's gotten us through a pandemic. He's gotten us through insurance hikes. All these things where so many businesses have folded in that time. And this dude in his mid-20s is like keeping it going because he believes in it so fucking much. And I respect that so much, man.
Totally. Yeah, I think with a lot of businesses now, and where you're saying older people generally are the ones that say, when are you going to open a shop? That's got to be the end goal. But I think now, we've changed the way that people think with a lot of different businesses. You can be involved in an industry without being the owner, being a subcontractor, working for yourself, all that sort of stuff, without having the stress and those overheads and those worries.
Yeah. And the commitment. It's like if I decide in a couple of years I want to move overseas, I can do that. I'm not tied down to anything. You know? I don't have that responsibility where other people are relying on me. I'm responsible for myself. So yeah, if I want to move, I'll move.
Yeah.
You know? Not anytime soon, but knowing I can.
Knowing you can, and talking about, it's a good segue looking into the future here, because I want to talk to you about a lot of different tattoos come and go in waves and trends and that sort of thing. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
What are some trends that you see now or that you see coming in the future, something that you think will change or potentially is already changing about the way tattoos are getting done in Melbourne?
Yeah. I think the way tattoo, like how people perceive tattoos has completely changed dramatically. So without specifically talking about a trend, the outlook on tattoos, they used to be a commitment. You get tattooed, that's for life. I feel like tattoos are less permanent now than they ever have been. Laser, you know, cover-ups. Like tattooing used to be a symbol of who you are and all that sort of stuff. And it still is to an extent, but now it's almost a fashion accessory, you know? So I feel like it's going to keep going in that direction. And there's talks of people like developing inks that last for 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, and then they fade or whatever. And I think it's not really working just yet, but it shows that that's where people are trying to take it.
Wow. So they could try out a face tattoo and go, oh, yeah. But in a month it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So I think, you know, the fact that people are trying to develop that, they're going to keep trying, and then it might go down that avenue. And that's not to say that tattooing as it is going to die. It's just like any other art form, there's going to be new genres and stuff that pop up, and, you know, that might appeal to a whole group of people that didn't want a permanent one to begin with. But the people that want the permanent ones are still going to get them. Yeah. You know, it's not going to change tattooing. It's just, you know, it's like within hip hop where there's so many sub-genres within hip hop. A new one pops up, the other ones don't die, you know? So I feel like it's like that. As for trends, I feel like it tends to go with whatever the celebrities are getting. Yeah. Really. You look at Kylie Jenner's got a red outline, whatever. You see a bunch of chicks starting to get a red outline, whatever, to try and mimic Kylie Jenner. But it's always been that way. Like David Beckham with the black and grey bodysuit where it's just clouds.
He had the neck crucifix thing on his neck, and you still see dudes with that. Yeah.
Yep. Justin Bieber got lettering going down the side of his neck. Every fuckboy went out and got lettering going down the side of their neck to look like Justin Bieber. You know,
even back to the females doing it. What was that? She went out with Angelina Jolie, and she got all, and then girls just straight copied all that shit.
Yeah, getting the sakyant tattoos, the hand poke monastic tattoos from Thailand. People going and just getting those in a tattoo shop in Melbourne. You know,
and it's interesting because that's pretty much what we were talking about earlier, where kids want to get, you know, face, neck, hand tattoos early.
Yeah.
They're copying celebrities or, you know, people on Instagram, TikTok, rappers or whoever that are going and doing that. So they think, well, that's the way it's done.
Yeah, those people are multimillionaires that don't have the implications or ramifications of getting a face tattoo. Yeah. They're rich anyway. Who gives a fuck? They don't need to get a job in a supermarket. Whereas these people see that, they like it. They're like, oh, but Post Malone has a face tattoo. I'll get a face tattoo. It's like, well, you're not Post Malone, are you? Yeah. You know, it's a bit different for you.
And you've also got to take into consideration, I think Post Malone's about 15 years younger than me, and the dude looks fucking weathered, man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Yeah, he's got some city miles on him for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely doesn't look like he's 31. Anyway, I don't know how old he is, but I don't think he's even 30 yet. He's like 20-something.
Probably not.
And he looks pretty fucking weathered.
Yeah. Because he's done some living.
He's done some living. Aside from the trends and that sort of thing, do you think that the way that people are getting tattooed as far as the logistics of it, is it like more going down the path of less walk-ins, more Instagram? Do you think that sort of thing? Or will there always be a spot for a high street shop where people can just spur of the moment walk in and get a tattoo?
I think that like walk-in shops will never die.
Yeah.
Because there's always people that want the spontaneity, the excitement, the sort of they're with their friends, they're in a bit of a silly mood, let's get matching friendship tattoos, and knowing that they can walk into a shop and get it and walk out like with that tattoo, because otherwise, if they have to book it in, they will have too much time to think about it and probably not get it, or they'll be like, oh fuck, the moment's gone now, like, you know. And there's a market for that, and like we all love a dumb tattoo, you know, like everyone's got to have at least one silly one, you know, like. I don't trust anyone that doesn't have one shit tattoo either, you know. If all your tattoos are good, it's like, fucking, what's your deal, man? You got to have one shit one, know what it's about.
If you've got all your tattoos you're very proud of, then I guess that it's not interesting. You've obviously thought it all too much out. And I think that anyone who's planned out their whole body, you know, where they're going to get tattooed, has done it in a... That's just too planned for my liking. You got to make it up as you go along.
100, yeah, it's more fun. Yeah. More fun that way. And also it's like... You learn a lot about yourself when you have a shit tattoo, you know. You're like, all right, cool. That's where the line is, you know. It's I won't make that mistake again.
It changed for me when I had a kid, and I'm like, I used to be like, I'll get stupid tattoos, I'll do this and that.
Yeah.
And then you take your 4-year-old to swimming class, and you got to jump in the water, and you're like, maybe that was a bad idea.
I've got a dick tattooed on my leg. I wear shorts. Oh, what? It is what it is. It's there.
Do people say now, do they go, oh, you've got a lot of tattoos, you're a tattoo artist? Do they jump to that conclusion, or do they just go, well, everyone's got tattoos now, and they don't think that when you just bump into someone in the street or whatever?
When I worked in Wagga, I was like, all the other tattooers were a lot older than me. I was the young guy. So I would tattoo a lot of the young people because they'd want to get tattooed by the dude in his 20s, not dude in his 50s or whatever. Just, I don't know.
The scary guy with the beard or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. So there was that sort of component. And I feel like, man, I've gone off course. What'd you say?
I was just saying that because you are pretty covered with tattoos, people presume that you're an artist, or do they just think, you know what I mean? Like, that's what the way people view tattoos has changed.
Yeah. So because I was the young tattoo dude in a smaller town, everyone's like, that's the tattoo guy.
Yep.
Right? And the old guys weren't going out to pubs and shit. I was going out to pubs.
Yeah.
So you're getting a bunch of attention and then people coming up to you being like, you're the tattoo guy, and you'd be like, yeah, and then they'd be like, how much for this, and just annoy the fuck out of you. I was at a cafe having breakfast with my dad, and the waiter wasn't taking our order. He was asking how much I would charge for shit, and you know, I hated it.
Yeah,
there was like that no kind of anonymity. And then I moved to Melbourne, and everyone's fucking housemate here is a tattooer. Yeah, it's great. You know, I love that. I love the fact that
you're a small fish in a big pond here.
Yes, and I love that, right? But now it's like everyone's so heavily tattooed, they'd be like, that guy's either a fucking tattooer or a barista. Could be either, you know? Who knows?
Maybe it's both. He's doing an apprenticeship when he's not pouring soy lattes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, people don't... I feel like now, I don't know whether it's a time thing or a geographical thing, people don't just assume you're a tattooer because you're heavily tattooed now. You could be anything. Yeah. And so I know a guy who works in a bank. He's like a manager in a bank and has his hands and neck tattooed.
Yep.
It's not a thing anymore. It's not a boundary anymore.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario because discrimination now, I don't think your workplace could say you can't work for us because of your ink. Can they say that?
I tattoo so many primary school teachers with visible tattoos, and I think because the demand for teachers is so high, they can't afford to turn people away because they have tattoos. Yep. I'm sure if you got a Swazi on your neck or something, they might, they might turn you away. Yeah. But if you got nice tattoos, you present yourself nicely, you're a good person. I don't think they really have much of a leg to stand on. Yeah. Obviously, the private schools, Catholic schools, it might be a little bit different, but public schools, man, I heavily tattooed public school teachers every week.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a thing anymore.
No. Aside from the tattooing and the podcast, well, this is kind of to do with the podcast, you're also doing a live show in December. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be chaos. It's going to be unbridled chaos. We're doing a live show that's different to the podcast. The format's different to the podcast. The premise is slightly different, but it's still for people that like the podcast. I've got Mike T from Blue Lady, who was a guest on season 2, and I have Reese Gordon from Little Tokyo in Sydney, who was a guest on season 1, and they're coming, and we're basically we've got a house band, so we're going to have live music throughout the show. It's at Comedy Republic, which is, for my money, the best comedy club in Melbourne. I go there to shows all the time, so I'm stoked to be able to have the show there. And yeah, we're basically telling the stories that none of us were game enough to tell on a podcast.
Right, so it's uncensored sort of stuff.
It's uncensored. It's not being recorded. Like, you have to buy the ticket to take the ride. You have to be there to hear the shit, the wildest shit we've got in our back pocket. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and then we're gonna have an after party afterwards. So we'll hang out with everyone. We'll go have drinks down the street, and you know, there's going to be more stories at the after party. So
you should film the after party.
Tattoo has gone wild. Just flashing. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's on the 16th. And if people want to check that out, I guess they can go. We'll put a link on the video description, and then they can find you on your page. Do you want to tell us what else you've got in store for next year, like 2024, if there's any other big plans or anything you've got coming up you want people to know about aside from that?
Hopefully a bit more travel next year.
More guest spots.
Some more conventions and stuff like that. Hopefully some international travel, maybe another season of the podcast. I try not to plan stuff too far ahead, because then it gets kind of overwhelming that your year's sort of booked up before you even get there, and then it's overwhelming. I try to sort of do stuff as I go. You know, this year we held art classes at Corpus, where it was sort of like those cork and canvas sort of nights. We called it Corpus Paint Club. So maybe bring that back next year as well. So teach people how to paint watercolors, paint flash. We found that was mainly just couples, you know, date night, something different. Come do that, have some beers.
A few Tinder dates.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, it'd be cool to sort of like start that back up again.
Maybe some more live shows. Is that potentially on the card, or you just want to get this one out of the way first?
I want to get this one out of the way, but I've said, and I'm sticking to this, the only way I will do more live shows is if we sell this one out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's in the hands of everyone else whether we do more live shows.
Yeah.
I'm down, but only if we sell this one out, because then we can take it to Sydney, we can take it to Brisbane, we can take it to Perth, whatever. It's easy enough to pop up and do.
Yep. But
the appetite has to be there. So if people can't make it to this one, share it, send it to your friends. Make sure your friends in Melbourne buy tickets. At $20 on the Comedy Republic website. So if it doesn't sell out, that's on you, not me.
That's a pretty good plug, man. Before we wrap it up, do you want to shout out any people or any socials or anything else? Is there anyone you want to, you know, say thanks to?
Oh, so many people I want to say thanks to. I mean, everyone at Corpus are fucking legends, and I'm not contractually obligated to say that. I genuinely mean it. I love the people I work with. Justin Stubbs, who owns Corpus, incredible tattooer, brand noob. Daniel Dankert, Denise Machado. We've got such a cool little family. We get guests all the time. It's the most relaxing environment ever. There's so much natural light. It's this old apartment that was from like 1890 or something, you know, this beautiful building with big windows right in the guts of Brunswick. So, I feel so grateful to work there. It's like, the reason I work 6 days isn't because someone's holding a gun to my head. I love going into work and tattooing. Yeah. And if the shop wasn't that kind of environment, I'd be looking for excuses to have days off. Yep. But it's not the case. So, you know, if I love being there so much, our customers definitely love coming and getting tattooed there as well. So it's
sounds like a sick place to work, man.
It's pretty sweet. It's pretty sweet. I wouldn't want to own it, but it's pretty sweet.
On that note, MJ, we're going to wrap it up, man. I'm going to get you to draw something in our book there, which I know that you're looking forward to.
Very much so.
Thanks for coming, man. Thanks. And I'd like to get you back again down the track. I want to get some returning guests. That'd be sick.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, man.
No worries.
I really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers, man.